Hi Britney, how you feeling? How you feeling, Britney? How's your dad doing?
Well, I certainly hope that given the amount of very suspect issues at hand there, that there's some kind of an independent investigation done into the circumstances under which this woman has lost autonomy over her finances and her personal life. And I also certainly hope that any individual who has any kind of an actual connection to the woman Britney Spears will be brave enough to speak out about what has actually been going on for over a decade. And if I may add, any individual who feels that it's appropriate for Britney Spears to be in this situation, any individual who feels that Britney Spears does not have the wherewithal to do things like use a phone without permission or drive a car without permission, I would really wonder why they feel it's appropriate for her to be touring the world for the last 3 years and to have put out 3 huge albums and to have had a very successful Vegas residency.
It could be a lot worse. You know what I mean? I think to myself, there are people out there that have it a lot worse than I do.
Britney Spears had made a major impact on pop culture, music, and the way the media treats people today. But as she headed into the biggest project of her career, things took a much more public turn. Britney had spoken her truth in private to her team multiple times, and in return, she was stripped of her basic human rights. And her truth was about to explode into a full-blown movement. And no one was prepared for the bombshells that were about to be dropped.
All of you who are concerned about me, all is well. My family has been going through a lot of stress and anxiety lately, so I just needed time to deal. But don't worry, I'll be back very soon.
She'll be taking up a 2-year residency at the Planet Hollywood in Las Vegas.
She's been the princess of pop for nearly 20 years.
Britney is no stranger to making headlines, but now her father Jamie is sounding off about that hashtag Free Britney. Free Britney!
This morning, Britney Spears' father Jamie speaking out against the viral campaign hashtag Free Britney, calling it a joke and a conspiracy.
When there's a lot of money involved, nothing would surprise me.
They're hoping Britney Spears and the judge will hear them as lawyers went back to the courtroom in the battle over the control of the singer's finances and part of her personal life.
So I'm a forensic mental health expert, and so that means I have a license to practice psychology in the state of California. So I do evidence code 730 evaluations, mostly in family court, in dependency court, sometimes in conservatorships, and then I do some work in criminal matters, mostly domestic violence, and then issues of capacity. So when capacity to like stand trial or a mental health defense, for a crime that's occurred, usually like a drunk driving related death or something like that. So I work a lot with attorneys, kind of putting together legal strategy for, how to manage, certain cases, based on the facts and the issues. I do those assessments. I do some clinical work, though it's mostly clinical assessment of victims and children, around child maltreatment, domestic violence, trauma, things like that. So, this is stuff that I see and deal with, every day, just sort of in a bit of a different capacity. But, much of what I do is advising attorneys on the sort of more human, social, mental health elements of a case and how to work that in to, how they present their case, how they prepare their clients, for testimony and for trial, how they can best sort of deal with their clients so that their voice and their position is presented in a way that can be heard, and they could ultimately be successful in, reaching the outcome that they want. It's like you can't say my name. Like nobody could, I'll mouth off, until the end of time, but only if I know that nobody will ever know who I am, because that, I'm not so worried about like never being able to work or whatever. I mean, I'm not doing anything that's unethical or illegal. Like even if they attempted to take my license or whatever, that like it couldn't happen, right? Because I haven't done anything wrong or bad. But public perception and, what could be done to you to quiet you, right? I would lose my ability to be able to do what I do, to help other people. So to serve the interest of one person, you must not also have an interest. No one is motivated to end this or to do anything other than what they're doing now, dragging it on in court. Her lawyer, it doesn't behoove him, right? Because as soon as that conservatorship is lifted, or it's it's reduced, or they start to step it down, he's out of a job, right? Now, that's true of any attorney or any professional, right? If we do our jobs well, we work our way out of a job, right? That's how we know we're doing a good job. But again, it is not about his interests, it's about his clients. And nobody here seems motivated to help her. Jamie is protecting his interests. His attorneys are being paid handsomely to file all of these lengthy, wordy papers and to continue to have hearings. Like, they're not going to say to him, like, look, let's just try to figure this out, this poor girl. No way. That's not going to suit them. And it's no sweat off Jamie because it's not his money that's paying for all this. Right? So the argument that, if we're just looking at the financial piece, that she is subject to undue influence and being taken advantage of, and being financially manipulated and all of that, and that's why she needs a conservator. Well, that's what the fucking conservator is doing. So when is someone going to slap the original petition for conservatorship on the table and look at the rationale for wanting a long-term conservatorship, and then looking at where we are now and analyzing it that way and saying that all the things, all the bullshit standard keyword language that, was argued and put in that petition to gain control of this woman, is now, what they said that they were trying to protect her from is what is being done to her by way of those quote unquote protections. We're talking about a human person here who's a mother, right? Who's a sister, who probably used to be a friend, who's an aunt, right? Like, who's thinking about her? She's locked within four walls while all this other crap and every single piece of paper that gets filed, every argument that's had, she pays for. Needs, right, as her mom, to see and understand that she probably has a lot more power and influence than she thinks. Now, with that being said, I can't begin to know or imagine what she has been through. She was married to this person who, I will say, is abusing her daughter. So don't get it confused or twisted that I don't understand, the inherently fucked position that this poor woman has been put in. That is the mechanism of coercive control. When a child's mother feels hopeless and helpless to save or help her own daughter, this is what we're dealing with here. And we can say it's all like money and power, and yeah, that's a big part of it. But it is Britney's money and her power that is being used to take away her power and her control. And that is fucked up. That is not okay. That is inhuman. And I don't care who she is, deserves better than that. She has never hurt anyone, right? Further, she's someone who has brought joy, right? And happiness and fun, and entertainment, to the world. And if we have to look at her as Britney Spears, she gets credit for that, right? Shouldn't she? And, you know, she has done by way of, you know, being who she is and, you know, spreading her art and bringing that joy and fun and all these positive memories to people. I think to some degree, we all have a responsibility, you know, to speak up for her and be like, you know, we've got your back now. As silly as that sounds, but whatever needs to be done to empower her mother, whether it's, and I would imagine there's very many things that are going to be required to do that: finances, the right people, courage and confidence and protection. Because I also, you know, it's also not lost on me that there could be negative consequences that come to her for doing probably what I would imagine she knows, you know, she, you know, quote unquote, should do or wants to do. I can't imagine as a mom, and I can't imagine what it's like for her every day, like to have this happening to her child and to be powerless to help or to affect any change. And further to have that playing out in the public eye, and, you know, as women, as moms especially, it's like the judgment is everywhere all the time, and the pressure, you know, that comes along with being a woman in general, and then, you know, being a mom on top of that, and having to do all the things all the time, and to be on your game all the time, and to do it right and perfectly, or to be judged, right, if you don't. Hearing you should, why aren't you? I can't imagine the hell that woman must live in every day, you know, quietly, probably, I would imagine. Yeah, and I just, you know, to think about that, like I said, as a mom, and as a mom who's lost a child to death, which I think is easier. I mean, if I had to be me, having a child that died, or Lynn Spears having a child who's being held captive that's beyond her reach, that she can't help, I'd be me any day of the week. Why? Because my circumstances are terminal, right? I can't change what's happened. You know, my son died, he's gone, and all I have to do is figure out how to, you know, continue to put one foot in front of the other every day. That's all I have to do. Because those feedback loops for me have been closed, because death is permanent. But to be a mother, you know, and to see your child just sort of like disintegrating and like breaking down, you know, before your eyes, in a way that is preventable. I just have a tremendous amount of empathy for her, and every time I think about this case or hear stories, she's who I think of, really, and Britney too, as a mom, and her kids. And I'm an aunt, and her nieces and nephews, and, you know, and the person who is at the helm of inflicting this harm is also related to these people and is supposed to care about them. The mother of his children, his daughter, his grandchildren, his other children. Nobody is talking about this. And I can't imagine that it wouldn't change the perspectives to think about it from this viewpoint for a little while. And the people that laugh at her and critique her makeup, and then her mother has to hear that, and her kids read that. I mean, this is so damaging on a human level to so many people. Let's forget the money. He could drain her dry. You know, she could bounce back and make money. That's not an issue. But these are human lives, right? That are being destroyed. And it's not just hers, her mother, her kids, her siblings, her nieces and nephews. Or maybe she just has nieces, I don't know. It like, I feel a heaviness in my heart just thinking about that. And it seems like that has just long been forgotten, that this is a human person that we're talking about who is connected to other human people. And that there has been direct efforts to exert control and to coerce people and systems so that all of those people who are being harmed by this as well are also powerless. And that, to me, is just, it is the worst, I think, miscarriage of justice that I could think of. And it is inhumane. If he has one too, right? Living with and being under a coercive, controlling person is like prison, but it's not like prison at all, unless you equate it to like a death sentence, like being in prison for life and knowing you can never get out and you're going to die in there one way or the other. That's how it can feel, being under the thumb of a coercive, controlling abuser with this pathology. And that's absolutely what's happening here. I don't doubt that this man believes that what he's doing is not harmful to his daughter and that he's helping her. And he believes all the shit. But therein lies the problem, right? That, you know, because of his pathology, he believes in what he's doing and that it's okay. And that foundationally is the problem. And that won't change, because this is a deep-rooted pathology that will only exacerbate when you try to get the person to acknowledge it. We're just going to spin our wheels and nothing's going to go anywhere with him in control, right? Because he just has his hands in everything and he's holding down everything, you know, everyone is stymied. So, you know, you have to get rid of that cancer, right? You have to get rid of the toxicity if you're going to, you know, if the system is going to start to function in any reasonable way. But you got to do it. You've got to get rid of that person. And that's what's difficult, because everybody is scared. You know, there's the haves and the have-nots, and, you know, it's fucked up. It's not just at all. And how anybody could look at this and think that it is, you know, it makes you feel gaslit yourself. That's how you know that you're dealing with a coercive, controlling abuser, is where you're like, what the fuck? Like 15 times a day when you're thinking about this. When you're like, am I being punked here? Like, how is this happening? You find yourself thinking and saying that over and over. You are dealing with a coercive, controlling abuser every single time. And you're essentially being cognitively gaslit. You know, you're looking at something, you know, this is pink, but everything else that's happening is going like, wait, you're saying it's blue, you're saying it's yellow with green polka dots, you're saying it's not even there. And then, but I feel it's pink. Wait, maybe how is this happening? How is this even happening? You start to question your own, like, what you know to be true, like what is just fundamental. This is coercive control. This is the impact of domestic violence. It's insidious. Nobody talks about it. The fear of God can be put in people never raising a voice or a hand.
So I think one thing that's just so upsetting about this happening, to Britney or honestly to anyone, is just imagining what it would be like to live through something like this. It makes me feel just claustrophobic and so anxious just thinking about it. Like, what are the possible effects of a situation like this conservatorship and this exercise of power over Britney? What are some of the ways that could impact anyone's mental health?
I mean, just the effects of prolonged isolation, right? Not having meaningful access to people who do not have a conflict of interest, right? Like not being able to go out and to socialize and to be in the world. But I mean, as a parent, to not have meaningful access to your children, to essentially be told, sometimes directly and then other times indirectly by way of needing to be supervised, that you can't parent your child, that you're a child yourself who happens to have children. So there needs to be a parent there to take care of you so you can see your children. I mean, she has no meaningful opportunity to be a mother to her sons, which is not okay. Let's just say she's mentally ill. Being mentally ill does not preclude a parent from being a parent to their children to the capacity and degree to which they can. So let's forget what she's going through for a second. Let's look at the shit show that is 2020 and isolation and quarantine and just the impact of now what has been prolonged isolation on all of us, which is then compounded by the not knowing, right? So the human brain, in order to regulate, needs to close what we call feedback loops, right? So those are those neural processes inside of our brain. And part of that is, and why humans don't do well with ambiguity, ambiguity opens a feedback loop and doesn't allow it to close because we don't know. This comes back to control and somebody having no control. As humans, we are biologically programmed to be in control. It's the fight or flight thing, right? So if we don't feel like we can breathe, we can control what's going on around us because we don't know what's happening. We don't know what's going to happen next. We don't know when the other shoe's going to drop. We don't know what resources we need. We can't get them, whatever it is. That will cause emotional, mental, and psychological dysregulation. And I think right now, in this moment, everybody in the United States and probably the world to some degree can understand this concept right now. I also have a car that I can drive. I have got a wallet full of credit cards. I can go wherever the fuck I want if I wear a mask. I have liberty, right? Take what we're going through now and then let me strip you of your liberties. I don't care how big of a fucking mansion I lock you in, but let me just lock you in 4 walls where all you see is staff and maybe your boyfriend every so often, and your father, who you would expect is somebody who loves and cares for you and wants to protect you, right? Just continues to want to silence you and keep you inside those 4 walls and insist that you are not okay and that you can't function as a regular human. And then on top of that, let's say that you have carried and birthed 2 children that you cannot reach out and touch easily, that you have been told you are not safe to be around. And your access to them and their access to you is limited, and it's contrived when it happens. And you have, I mean, do I have to keep going? Like, we talk about freedom. Has she ever been? What does that look like for her? When was the last time someone sat her down and said, freedom? What does that mean? Draw me a picture. Tell me all the words that come to mind. If you had a magic wand, we call this a Socratic question. If you had a magic wand and could, paint the picture of your life tomorrow, what would it look like? Who would be here? What would you do? What would be happening? How would it look? Has anyone asked her that? I hope so. I don't know. Someone needs to ask her that question and then begin to advocate to get her there. Getting her whatever help she needs, whatever support she needs, whatever medicine she needs, whatever space she needs, whatever guidance and learning she needs. Someone needs to forget that who, quote unquote, Britney Spears is, and forget that she's sitting on a metric fuck ton of money, and forget all those things and see her as a human who has been abused, I think, and controlled like a battered woman is by her dad, who should protect her and who's saying he's doing it under the guise of protecting her, just like abusers do, right? By a system that's not protecting her. She's surrounded by staff and people and handlers, who are supposed to be managing her but aren't protecting her. The longer this goes on, the longer she's isolated. I mean, this is literally, it's eating away at like the surface of her brain. So like this level of trauma, being isolated, it's like that Stockholm syndrome, creates lesions on the surface of the brain. Do you notice like she talks different than she used to? Her voice is different. Her pupils are fixed and dilated a lot. Like when she's talking, she's got this kind of pressured, speech. Like everything about her is different, than what you're used to seeing, right? And that, her system, her physiology, her neurobiology has been impacted by all of this trauma that continues to occur. I mean, the prolonged effects of isolation are profound. It doesn't matter if you're being held, in a 2x2 dark cave or a 50,000 square foot mansion. It is isolation, being alone, not having a purpose, not having love, not having, unconditional love and support, not having people to talk to, not having things to do. Like that grates on people. Like that's not how human beings are programmed to live and to function, right? We're social beings. Like that idea, that having no power, no control, being isolated, that is the damage, that is the mechanism of assault that coercive controlling abusers employ. And it's powerful. If you look at, the range of domestic violence, it's way easier to treat and rehabilitate a victim who's had the shit beat out of them time and time again, because they recover, right? They could become less fearful over time when they're separated from that person, right? They could, you can remind them of their sense of agency, but when they've had their sense of agency taken, right? When they can't trust their most primitive gut instincts and thoughts and feelings, when they're hopeless and helpless and have every single move controlled and have all of their, their autonomy and their agency taken away, that strips a person of who they are. They are just a shell and they don't know who they are. And you basically have to sort of, find a way to kind of create a person. And, they're robotic and they're emotionally distanced, and, the human has been taken from them, in prolonged, psychological manipulation and coercive controlling abuse. And that is extremely damaging to a person's psyche. And it literally impacts their neurobiology, how the chemicals in their brain process, and it starts to impact the actual structure of their brain, because prolonged trauma has significant structural and neurological effects on the brain. The war survivors are a perfect example of that, right? They hear a car backfire and they, freak out. That's because their brains, the neural pathways in their brains have been redirected by significant trauma. In and of ourselves, we are extremely resilient. But when that resilience is continually chipped away at, if we think of resilience as, a thing, right? Each one of these insults or assaults, comes and chips away at it. And when they happen continually and you don't have time to recover, that's when you find yourself starting to break down. And I mean, she's never had any time to build her own sense of agency, let alone rebuild it. Wouldn't some reasonable psychologist say, I wonder what the impact of prolonged isolation has done to this woman? All I could say is that things have to be shaken up and like cages need to be rattled. Like there needs to be a different focus, right? People need to start saying the things that are going unsaid and drawing attention to these things that are so obvious. But, that all of this other stuff is intended to be smoke and mirrors around, right? To just distract from. Because the more time that they're able to take to do that, the more Britney will suffer and the more needy she will appear and be. And the harder it will be to get her what she needs, and to give her any semblance of, an autonomous, comfortable life that's hers. So that's what we have to lose here, is her. Not her money or her thing, her.